Hello, welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I've been a Buddhist for about 21 years and a Taoist practitioner also for another 6, overlapping with those 21 years. My main traditions, for those who are interested, have been Gelug Tibetan Buddhism and a bit of Zen, because one of my teachers was greatly influenced by Zen, as well as the Dragon Gate School of Taoism and the Complete Reality School. I'm on a bit of a mission to do my best to combine everything that I know of meditation in both a modern academic context in terms of cognitive science as a not as a non-scientist, of course, and from a traditional training standpoint, having trained in a number of different meditative systems to take my knowledge and transform it into something that will allow everyday folks like yourself, hopefully, to make some real progress in meditation while living in the real world. I was moved to do this because, well, as a Buddhist, it's good to do things like teach people meditation to make their lives a little bit better. But also, according to Buddhism, meditation is something that human beings can do. This is not exclusively a Buddhist thing just because it's described in Buddhist texts. If you have a mind and you use it properly, then you should be able to learn how to meditate, right? So this is the idea, right? So now, what is it that I teach? Well, I teach 4 techniques spread out over 5 different circumstances or 5 different sort of areas of training. So the first technique that I teach is a breath practice, as many systems start with a breath practice, but the way that I teach it is quite different for those of you who have been around for a while. And then I teach a body scanning practice, and same thing there. There are many, many, many body scanning practices around the world. Uh, they have also been proven highly effective in cognitive scientific studies of meditation to make your mind very, very calm very, very quickly and to help with a number of other things. The way that I teach body scanning is informed by a number of different things that I've studied, a number of different systems that I've studied. And so I try to bake into my body scanning training process for all of you quite a number of things that I don't necessarily have to explain or tell you. You'll get those benefits and be prepared for other things that might come later in your training if you stick around and do all the weird stuff that most of these systems say you can do. You will be preparing for those more interesting things in all of these systems simply by doing this technique. Um, and then I move into a technique called Mahamudra. So Mahamudra, despite the very fancy sounding name, at least in terms of the initial stages of Mahamudra, what you're learning to do basically is become aware of what your various types of consciousness are like, which is quite useful to know what vision actually is, to know what hearing actually is, and so forth, and to know what your mind actually is. And then finally, the last thing I teach is how to use the process in Western psychology that's called rumination to instead of generate negative emotions, negative worldviews, harmful mental states, to do the opposite, which is exactly how it's described, by the way, in Buddhist psychological texts, that we have these mental processes that are basically out of control, and we add on reason upon reason, experience upon experience to some small thing that made us uncomfortable until we're outraged. And the texts are very clear that that process is actually quite effective at transforming what's on the surface of your mind. Unfortunately, you've been using it to make your mind worse. You could take this same rumination process and use it to make the mind better. So this is the idea with what I call Foundation 5. This technique you could employ in a wide range of religious contexts or secular contexts to transform your worldview, your character, your attitude, your intent, and so forth. So with these foundations, with what I call 5 foundations. You can build whatever type of spiritual practice or secular practice you'd like to build here in the real world. And of course, if you want to perfect these things, you're going to need to do a bit more practice, go into retreat for a bit, etc. But these skills gained in the real world will allow you to take more of your retreat capabilities into real life. So that's why we're here. That's my extended introduction that I don't normally do. But there it is. So who's in the room? Jay is here. Dave is here. Welcome, welcome. Sorry, I was running slightly behind, so I have a little bit of my dinner here. I hope you don't mind. So do we have any questions? I'll adjust this a bit. I'm gonna fall asleep to my voice. Okay. Well, maybe we'll do some body scanning then. We'll do some body scanning practice. You'll fall right asleep. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, body scanning is a very, very, very interesting practice. If you're going to do a really, really, really detailed body scan, it can take, you know, it can pretty easily take about 90 minutes. I've never done one that long on live because most people start freaking out after about 15 minutes. There's something about putting so much attention in the various parts of your body. It totally freaks your nervous system out if you're not used to it. So you have to build up some familiarity with the practice before you try to do one that's too detailed. Retreat. If uh, if we do retreat soon, if we do this retreat in Poland, I'll probably live stream a fair amount of the sessions. So if this retreat in Poland works out at the one of the medical universities there, we may be doing like a 3-day weekend retreat in October. If that works out, I'll live stream some of the sessions, and maybe I'll do one of my longer body scans during that. If there's enough, if people in the room, if they can actually do it. So, any questions today? So with body scanning, Jay, I recommend actually having slightly less forceful intent. Um, the scan itself, the scanning process itself, will calm your mind down. And if you've already built up that muscle of pulling your awareness in and putting most of it in one place, that's enough, I think, to have a pretty good, pretty detailed body scan. On the other hand, if you read the materials that go along with that, which again I haven't done a body scan of this kind in this open forum, but you could have the intent, okay, I'm not just going to scan, I'm going to stop in places where I can't get my mind in there. And when you get to those places where you're stopping and trying to get your mind in somewhere, you can press a little bit and try to get more bandwidth in there, because I suspect that by pulling more of your mind into one place and making it HD, instead of 320p, that over time the effect will be that you can get your mind into these more detailed areas of the body. Also, I don't do this aspect on these streams because nobody can do it, but you can also put your mind into the organs and stuff too. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a few years of doing body scans and spending time trying to get your mind inside the cavities, and then once it's in the cavities, getting it into the individual organs that are in the cavities and so on. This takes time, and it's not easy to do. But you can develop the capability to feel where your organs are, and how different parts of your body are put together, and where the muscles go and connect and all of that. So yeah, if you're trying to develop those kinds of capabilities, it can help to squeeze the awareness a little bit, sort of like intensive breath. But by the time in the way that I teach that you're doing body scanning, you should be moving on to what's called the second type of conveying, which is, what do they call it? I can't remember the name, but there's four types of conveying the mind to the object. The first one has a great deal of force. The second is that your mind already can pull itself somewhere, so you don't have to have that degree of force. And this happens, I think, at the third stage of working with your mind in terms of developing concentration. So, in my way of teaching it, if I was doing it a bit more formally, you'd spend enough time with Foundation One that your mind basically has this skill of being able to pool where you put it with relative ease. See what I mean? So, in terms of percentage, you, you need to you need to turn the volume up and down based upon what your mind is doing. If you're trying to put it in your hand and your mind is running off over here and the rest of the body is pulling your attention away and so on, you need to turn up the volume, because now you have the ability to turn up the volume to 100, right? You've trained that. So now you need to gain the ability not to just have two settings, 0 and 100. You need to be able to adjust the volume knob so that you can fine tune how much force you're putting into grabbing the part of the grabbing the object, so to speak. Does that make sense? And in the end, you want to be using the minimum amount of force that's required to make the mind do what you want it to do. But in the beginning, the minimum amount of force required is like 100%. Okay. Let's see. How do you best think about attention? Does it show elasticity of mind, or is it a limitation of mind? How to best think about attention? The way that I think about attention is defined. How do I? Sorry, Jay. I don't want to make you scared of becoming dumber, but it is something that we should become aware of, right? We need to be aware that if the mind is getting really, really sort of dull and starting to fall asleep, and you spend a lot of time in that state, your mind will become stupider. This is what doing that does. And it does it for reasons that make sense, because you get used to the fact that when I focus in on something, I take part of my attention and I put it on the fact that the mind is calm. So the lucidity, the amount of bandwidth, is now a bunch of it's over here, really intensely observing my internal state that's really nice, and a little bit of it is over here watching the object. So it's dull, and I'm not taking in very much information about the object. If you train that as a type of mental state, then your ability to see the details, notice the details, be aware of things externally becomes less. So, in terms of attention, I'm not sure how you're using the term based upon the other things that you said, Lang. Generally speaking, the way that I teach meditation is this. In the beginning, if your mind is so out of control you can't make it do what you want it to do, there's very little chance that you're going to actually be able to gain access to what the various types of consciousness you have are. How could you? You can't get your mind to hang out long enough to be able to look at anything, right? So there's this idea, of course, that the most profound practice, the highest practice of many systems, or at least related to the highest practices of many systems, is this idea of getting rid of as much intention as possible. Intentions, not attention. Intention, where you're trying to basically not do anything in particular and let the mind abide in its natural condition without screwing with it. And because this gives you the ability to then see what the mind is more and more and more, because you're not involved with something, the mind's not busy looking at this, right? Since this would obscure the mind being able to see what it is of itself because it's so busy doing this. So you would just have it do less and less until you can see, especially if you can pull the other awarenesses inside. Now you're becoming increasingly aware of what the mind itself is. So this is all true, but if you don't have any ability to control what your mind is doing on the surface and where your attention is going, you don't have the ability either to stop your mind from doing the normal stuff that it does and enter a condition of non doing. You need your attention to be on, I'm going to be in a state of non doing. And if you can't keep it there, then the mind re enters a state of doing. So you need this skill. You need this skill of being able to move your attention where you want to, or even more profound practices like just sitting or sitting and forgetting from the Taoist tradition, very similar. Zolong. Mahamudra, which is the version of this that I teach. Same practice, but broken into a lot of little pieces that are easier to manage. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I did my best. Okay. Mike, read the Bhagavad Gita. I've read parts of the Gita. I've read parts of the Gita. And then you said you made a comment somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. YouTube, do what you do. I'm not seeing a recent comment from you. Well, in any case, yeah, Mike. I mean, there's good stuff in the Hindu traditions, in the Hindu canon. There's fantastic stuff in there. I agree. You know, there's some stuff I wouldn't agree with, obviously, but there's a ton of great stuff in there. I think one of the things that would help people in general is this idea that we are storytelling creatures, aren't we? We're storytelling creatures. For example, if I tell you very precisely that if you don't have wisdom that understands how things work, and you try to apply empathy at a high level, that this is going to cause big problems. Telling you that is relatively easy to forget, right? Because you hear facts like this all the time. It's relatively easy to forget. It's forgettable. You kind of go, yeah, that's probably true, and then it leaves your mind. But if I tell you a story that illustrates that fact, even if it's kind of a silly story, that story will be stuck in your mind for the rest of your life and will lock that information in your head in a way that's more accessible to you when it matters than just giving you a definition and a critical description. So, for example, I've told this story before, but there's this idea of idiot compassion in Buddhism where a There's a young girl. She's not very smart, and her mother's being bitten by mosquitoes underneath a blanket. And her mom says, "You have to do something about these mosquitoes. They're biting me over and over again. Just do something. Help." And her daughter is again not very smart, but she's moved by empathy and compassion and love for her mother. And so she gets a pestle, like a either made of hard wood or stone for breaking up spices and so forth. A pestle, right? And she starts beating all the insects that are on the blanket. And then when she gets done, only afterwards does she realize that the blanket wasn't thick enough to stop her mother from being killed by beating all the insects. So her mom died in the process of her daughter trying to beat all these insects to get them off of her mother. And so like this, you can understand very clearly that if you don't understand what you're doing, it doesn't matter how much empathy and compassion you have, actually. You can have all the empathy and compassion in the world, but if you're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing, then there's no guarantee at all you're going to help anybody. And you might hurt a lot of people out of compassion. You might do the wrong thing. So by itself, compassion is like, it's like a bird with one wing. That to fly, that bird needs two wings. The other wing is understanding how stuff works. If you don't understand how stuff works, your compassion is totally dead. Right? And you may use it to hurt people, which is really, it's idiotic, right? It's idiot compassion. Okay, so we are storytelling creatures. So one of the things that the Hindu canon does really well, the Bible does really well, the Old Testament does really well, the Sikh texts do really well. I mean, everyone has sort of figured this out in religion, that symbol, analogy, allegory, story gets things in people's minds and makes it stick in a way that's sort of stickier and more helpful. And the information comes up when needed if you give it to people through story. So, yeah, I mean, I encourage people to read all sorts of things. That doesn't necessarily mean that all of the information communicated in all the stories of the world is true. But in terms of transforming your character and improving your understanding of a number of issues, you know, the great stories of the world's religions can be, just as a general rule, can be quite helpful. And this is why I think they have survived so long. Not just because people think that the ultimate truth is contained therein, but because stories can be transformative in ways that are real and important for human beings. Okay. Let's see. So what percentage will make okay, yeah. Listen, the problem with the problem with mental laxity is not that you don't have full concentration. The problem with mental laxity is that your mind has attention has split. In the beginning, it's like this, and it's on the object, and then you start to notice that the mind is calm, and part of your awareness goes like this, and it starts to focus on the fact that the mind is calm. And while it's over here focusing on the fact that the mind is calm, the object is getting duller and duller and duller because more of your awareness is now, they say, sinking in the sort of calmness and thoughtlessness, blankness of your mind. And that will make you more depressed. It will make you stupider. It'll make your mind less sharp. It'll make your memory worse. So when people are talking to you, you won't be able to remember what they said. You know, like it's really harmful. But really, like if you weren't going to change objects, if you're going to stay with the same object, you just need to take your attention back out of the fact that you're noticing that how calm the mind is and put it back on the object until the awareness of the object is really bright and lucid and fresh again. It's not all dull and pixelated. Okay. Is it possible to achieve realization of enlightenment apart from meditation? There are methods, according to the Tantras, where you don't have to meditate. But it's a little bit of a weird subject because, at least from what I've seen, you don't have to meditate sort of now, but you will later. You know, it's sort of like there are methods that you can do that are extremely effective at getting you to places or conditions where you'll continue your practice until you attain enlightenment. But it's a little bit different than saying you could attain enlightenment in one lifetime with this particular technique. That's a little different, right? Like, for example, with POA practice, transference of consciousness practice, without very much capability, with relatively limited capability, you can learn, according to the tantras, how to eject your mind from the top of your head, and then you can, at the time of death, because you don't want to do that before you die, before you're about to die, at least. When you get very close to your natural point of death, then you you press the eject button, and bang, you shoot out the top of your own head, and then you retain more of your memories and more of your ability to decide what you're doing because you didn't sort of go through the normal process of dying. And then you uh, basically you sort of booked a one-way ticket to one of the pure realms. you know, you do all these practices to help you get into one of the pure realms so that you can finish your practice there. So you're going to have to, in my understanding at least, of the pure realms, you're still going to have to do all your practices there. It's not like you can bypass actually doing your practice. But there are methods that make it, with very little practice, relatively speaking, make it possible for you to enter conditions where now it's going to be much, much, much easier in an important sense to do your practice. Hello, everyone. Sweet and Sour, Bell. Good to see you again, Bell. Luck 108, Sugar Free. Yeah, and also mostly no, because if you're talking on the tantric side, even doing something like POA can be blah 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 pretty demanding. Furthermore, if you talk, like, there are all these other methods where they say basically from a tantric perspective you don't have to do the meditation part, but again, um, that in theory that would be in most cases because somebody did a lot of work already before. And without having to do very much meditation or very little or sometimes no meditation, they just re-access the realizations they've already had from the past. And then that capability is available to them. This is part of what happens to tulkus. There's a really funny thing, by the way, in the Tibetan tulku community. This is the reincarnated Lama community, where if you died through ordinary means and you lost your memories, then for a period of time as a tulku, you're basically a normal person. You have a little bit better qualities than other people because you've done a lot of work and all this, you know, but you're a relatively ordinary person for some time. And then at some point you do more intense practice, or you're reading a text that was critical to your previous rebirth or whatever, and then bang, all the information and realizations from your previous rebirth, or a huge amount of them, come back, and you have all of that again without having to do all the work you did last time. And so until that point, sometimes the Tibetans, they call that kind of tulku, they call them a half-baked tulku. They're not a fully baked tulku yet. you know, like a dumpling that hasn't been cooked all the way yet. Anyways, I think it's better to just think about it like you're going to have to do all the practices, and that's, for us normals, for us normies, that's how it's going to be. Can meditating get you free of grief and depression? I would say, here's what I would say. When it comes to any kind of conventional thing you're dealing with, if you go through all of the conventional types of help that there are, if you go through some therapy, help from family, et cetera, all the normal things you would do, training in meditation will make it every stage of that faster and easier. It won't make it for us normal people who aren't arhats, right? Because we still are subject to all these negative emotions. For all of us, for all of us normal people, you're still going to go through all of the normal emotions that you would go through. But if you train in meditation and wisdom and these other things that I usually don't get into that much in this class, so that your mind, the quality of your mind is becoming better and better, then everything else you do with your mind becomes easier. So when there's loss, the loss is easier to deal with. When there's depression, even though the depression is there, you're more functional than you would have been if you hadn't done all this training. I mean, I'll give you an example from my own life because there have been times where I've been quite low, where I failed at a business or failed at something else or couldn't get things going in the way I wanted or whatever for long periods, months or what have you, and got quite sad. And I remember when I was much younger, if things went really, really bad, sometimes I'd crash and burn for months, and it would be really difficult emotionally to get out of it. And now, more recently, when I look at the worst things that have happened in the last 10 years, like pretty bad things that have happened in the last 10 years, I've been able to handle those with much more grace, even when they were very difficult, or even when my mind was basically getting sad or depressed for a long period. I was able to manage that in a way that was much more skillful and still do all of the stuff that I needed to do and still do all the training I needed to do and still attend most of the classes and blah 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 that I had intended to attend during that time. Whereas in the past, I would have just crashed and burned. You know what I mean? So I think as a practitioner, you have to go, okay, look, I'm still going to be subject until I'm an arhat, right? Until you are a fully realized arhat who's free of all types of negative mental states, you're going to have all of the same BS as everybody else. Probably for the rest of this lifetime, that's how it's going to be. So what's going to change is that over 5 years, 10 years, 15-year period, your negative emotions, your negative mental states will get easier and easier to manage, and you'll be more and more functional and better during the most difficult times. It doesn't mean you're not going to have difficult times. And that, I mean, this is a really important thing to know because as a practitioner, you can also get depressed that you're depressed. You go, no, no, I'm supposed to be a great practitioner. I shouldn't be getting depressed. Says who? All of the texts say you don't get over your negative emotions until you're an arhat. So why would you not get depressed? Why would you not get sad? Why would you not get angry? Why would you not get lustful? Why would you not get jealous? Why would you not be arrogant? Until you're an arhat, you're going to have all of your negative emotions, all of them. You're going to have all of your negative mental states, every single one of them, including me, right? Until you're an arhat, you're going to have some degree of these. But what changes is that slowly over the years, if this is arhatship and this is your negative emotions, right? So here's arhatship. We're going to move it down here. And here's your negative emotions. As you're getting closer and closer to arhatship, it's going like this, where your negative qualities are becoming less and easier to deal with, and your positive qualities are becoming more, right? So there's an inverse relationship as you get closer and closer to greater and greater realization. But until you have completely switched, there are levels, increasingly subtle levels of every type of negative thing there is to deal with as a human being. So you also shouldn't have unrealistic expectations of all your teachers and stuff, because even if they've done a lot of meditation or whatever, and even spent time in retreat, they can still get angry. They can still get lustful. They can still get this and that. They can still have greed. They can still have jealousy. They can still have arrogance, unless they're an arhat. So when you read in the news that Lama so and so, it turns out that he was sleeping with all of his students. Of course he was. Had he completed like 12 years of retreat and attained arhatship? No. Okay, well, he was like 19 and surrounded by all these people who thought he was a god. What did you think was going to happen? For goodness sake. You know, you know what I mean? Like, what did you think was going to happen? So, we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations about what people can do. And even on the bodhisattva path, okay, where somebody's attaining rebirth successively, and this is like their sixth rebirth on the tantric path as a bodhisattva, for example, right? It's possible that that person isn't yet an arhat, even though they have taken control of the rebirth process through tantric methods or whatever. it's still possible to not yet be an arhat. So all of the negative motions and mental states, to some measure, to some degree, can be there. So these are really important things to know, so that you don't put unrealistic expectations and so forth on your teachers, and certainly not on older brother, right? Because as I try to tell people truthfully, legitimately, I'm an okay practitioner. I've been around some practitioners that are really great. I'm okay. I'm an okay practitioner. You know? So if you find me impressive, this shows you just how far you are from the great ones. Okay, let me go through the questions quickly so we can actually get into the practice. Uh, what are my thoughts on using temperature shift of the in and out breath as a meditative anchor? I've noticed this helps. So, Jonathan, it's interesting you asked that question because not a lot of people ask that question, and they should if they're doing this practice. So, I'm actually quite pleased that you're asking this question, not in exactly that way, but if you're practicing intensive breaths a fair amount, one of your questions should be, what is my mind doing in the gap between my breaths? And no one in 2 months has asked that question yet, except for you. So I'm quite pleased you brought that up. I'm going to have to put that on the wall in the group because this is one of those questions that you should ask if you're doing the practices. So the intent actually is quite specific. You're not actually following the breath in a really important sense. Sometimes I might say that, but more often I hope that what I say, because I'm pretty sure that's what I say, is you become aware of the sensations at the tip of the nostril, right? You become aware of the sensations at the tip of the nostril or wherever on the patch of skin that you're putting the attention. So, in between the two breaths, you keep your mind fully focused on whatever sensations are there in that patch of skin, which I guarantee you, if you put a great deal of force on placing your attention on that patch of skin, there's going to be sensations there. Even if it's just sort of like a dull thrum of almost like, I don't know how to describe it, but uh, there's sort of like sometimes you have the sensation almost like a piece of wet fabric that you flick and it makes that sort of dull sound. In terms of tactile sensation, there's something like that which can be there between the breath, where it's just sort of this sort of a dull vibratory kind of thing that's happening there because it's alive and there's blood flowing through it and whatever. But I don't like saying too much because then people imagine stuff. You know, this is why I like people to bring it up rather than describing to them how it's supposed to be. The key point is keep your attention on that patch of skin. Yeah? Just keep it on the patch of skin no matter what happens. It's on the patch of skin, it goes to the number and it goes back to the patch of skin. That's the whole exercise. Okay. Is it possible to train your mind to pay equal attention to only 5 things at the same time? Yeah, you can train it to do all sorts of stuff. I mean, in how much of that can I say? There are all sorts of techniques in Buddhist practice, Hindu practice, Sikh practice, you name it. There are all sorts of practices where you learn how to divide your attention between lots of different things at the same time. And you can think about single pointed concentration or developing the ability to have this thing that we're calling single pointed concentration can be multi-pointed actually. It's better thought of as having full control over where the bandwidth of your attention is going. You're having full control over the bandwidth of your mind. Right now you don't. Right now your mind does all sorts of stuff out of control. But when you train in some certain practices, you're learning how to take control of more and more and more of what your mind is doing and fill that bandwidth up with stuff that you're doing on purpose. I don't know if that helps. But yeah, you can place it on all sorts of things at the same time. I mean, oh, Lang, I don't think you've done any of my Mahamudra practice. But in Mahamudra practice, you're learning how to have the mind suffuse or fill up all five of your external senses simultaneously as a single object of concentration. Because that's the full range of the external conventional activity of your consciousness. And so you take the entire external range of your awareness as the object, a singular object of concentration. Indifference means you don't care. Equanimity means that you don't, that you have replaced some type of out of balance activity with some type of activity that's in balance. All right. Okay. Let's do a little practice because we don't want to run too far over time. My wife will be angry with me. I told her I'd be on time today. Okay. So we're just going to do 90 seconds, 2 minutes of intensive breath. So give it everything you have. I'm not going to describe the instructions for that because I've done that probably half of the last 60 classes. So if you're new, just do your best. So place your attention on the breath. 3, 2, 1, begin. Okay, we're going to do the body scan a little bit different today. Starting from the top of the head. If you were to divide the top of your skull into 3 pieces from front to back, on the back third of your skull, you might find that there's an area there that has a bit more sensation than other areas on the top of your skull. If so, place your attention there. If not, then just place it towards the middle of the skull on the back third. And now just become aware of the actually we'll go it in reverse order. So bring your mind down through the top of your head to your throat. From your throat, find the back of your tongue and go forward to the tip of your tongue. Now underneath your tongue, roof of your mouth, your teeth, the skin inside your mouth, the bottom lip, top lip, the lower lip area and chin, the upper lip area, left cheek, right cheek, left eye and eyebrow, right eye and eyebrow, nose, and your forehead. Your left ear, right ear, the right side of your scalp, and the left side of your scalp. Now, finally, the back of your scalp, but not your neck. So, the back of your skull would be a better way to say it. Now, as best you can, get the mind into the joint between the neck bones and the skull. Now, the top third of your neck, middle third, and the lower third. Just to mix these practices a bit, the way that I was describing, move your mind now to the back side of the lower third of your neck. So, quite a few people have neck tension because we look down at iPhones and we have anxiety and so on and so forth. And most of that neck tension isn't actually neck tension, it's shoulder tension from holding your shoulders in the air. So, most of us rotate the shoulders forward, which you're going to feel as tension on the sides of your neck, on the left and right sides, in the back. And we also lift the shoulders up, which you'll feel as tension running up the back of the neck and sort of towards the intersection of the back of the shoulder blades and the neck. You'll feel it there. So, what I'd like you to do is just don't try to adjust anything. Just a bit like intensive breath meditation, allow and with a degree of force, bring as much of your awareness into that tissue at the lower third of the neck towards the center. Uh, how am I trying to say this? So, the lower third of the neck, more towards the center in the back, and just let a ton of your awareness soak into that lower third in the center. Now, I want you to raise your shoulders slightly, slightly, and move them forward slightly, slightly. Now that your mind is soaked into that area, and just feel what tenses up when you raise the shoulders and try to move them forward. Now that you can feel those muscles there. And then with the same amount of deliberateness, just relax those muscles back and down. Don't pull the shoulders down and back. Just release the tension that doesn't need to be there to hold the shoulders up and in place. So in the materials for body scanning, besides this last bit that I've added on here, this is one of the exercises that you can do where if you can't get your mind into a certain part of the body, as long as you set the intent before the session that you're going to stop in areas where you can't get the mind in there, as long as that's what you've decided to do ahead of time, you can stop and spend more time on a certain area. So now we'll carry on with the body scan at the normal pace, and we'll do it a little bit abbreviated because we took a lot of time to work on this one little area. And we're going to stop in one other place. So, just for the sake of time, bring your awareness to the complete shoulder on each side. And then just stretch your awareness down to both of your hands so that the object of awareness is both of your arms from the shoulder to the hand. Okay, now bring your awareness back up the arms to the chest belt, what I call the chest belt. So from the solar plexus up to the nape of your neck or to the collarbone area in the front. And we're not including the shoulder blades, but just the sort of cavity of the chest, basically in the back, if that makes sense. The shoulder blades are part of your shoulders, not your back or not your chest belt. So, what I'd like you to do here, just as a little bit of an exercise, because we were talking about getting the mind into the organs, one of the easiest sets of organs to feel is your lungs. So, don't do anything artificial with your breathing, but I want you to put a little bit more awareness in the back side of your chest belt. So, on the back half of your chest belt, and then just breathe normally. But as you breathe normally, do your best to get the mind inside the chest cavity instead of just at the surface of the chest cavity. And as you do that, for some of you, you'll start to notice that the lungs, which are on the back half, mainly the back half of the chest cavity, you'll start to feel where they are and you'll feel them opening and closing on the inside of the chest cavity. Now move your awareness around to the front of the chest cavity. So again, above the solar plexus, from the solar plexus to the nape of the neck or the collarbone area. And place particular attention on the front left side of your upper chest. And then, as best you can, move your awareness inside the chest cavity of the left side of your chest. And probably not for all of you, but for some of you, you'll notice that you feel your heartbeat really strongly here. And that's because that's where your heart is. Okay, now just for the sake of time, we'll go through the rest of the scan a little bit abbreviated. So bring the awareness to the diaphragm belt, which is basically from the top of the waist to the solar plexus area, stretching all the way around the body. And then bring the awareness to the waist belt, above the hips, below the diaphragm. Bring the awareness to the pelvic belt. Bring your awareness to the tailbone, anus, perineum, sexual organs, very brief scan arriving at the tip or the most sensitive point, depending upon whether you are morphologically male or female. Into the hip joints on both sides, upper thighs on both sides, lower thighs on both sides, knees on both sides, calves on both sides, ankles, heels, arches, and tops of feet, the balls of your feet, your pinky toes on both feet, fourth toe, third toe, second toe, and the big toe. And we'll finish there. So like this, you can do a body scan in either direction. Normally I do it upwards because doing it downwards makes the mind even more calm. And if you make the mind really, really, really calm, you'll just fall asleep. And so I like moving up the body to the crown because it tends to make the mind very lucid and fresh while also making it very calm. But there's less danger of you becoming sleepy and dull. But hopefully, some of you had a little bit of experience of being able to get a bit of the mind into the chest cavity, for example, and had a bit of experience where you actually could feel your heartbeat over here. You could actually feel your lungs and kind of where they were. So you can do this exercise where you stop in areas where you can't feel what's happening there, and you just sort of zoom in and let more of your awareness soak in there until you can feel what's happening. And then we did a little micro exercise for release. Um, if you're doing Chinese internal arts and health arts, there are what's called Neigong internal skill, where you would do release practices like that, but you do the whole body. You don't just do the neck or something. You would learn how to do it with the whole body, and then you learn how to do even more interesting things with your Neigongs. But yeah, hopefully just from doing the neck, you learned, some of you, that if I soak my mind in somewhere that's not working properly, and then I sort of figure out how it actually works, right? By playing around with it a bit, I go, oh, okay, so this part is these, and this part, that's these, because I can feel it. Then you can let it go and release it. And now your neck is better and doesn't distract you during the rest of your session. See what I mean? It's quite intelligent if you can learn to work with yourself. Maybe you have an anxiety issue. Someone was mentioning depression and so forth earlier. Maybe you have an anxiety issue and a lot of it's being stored here. So you start your session focused on that patch, you can't see the back obviously, but on that patch behind you where all of that tension likes to live in the lower third of the neck. And you do intensive breath, then you put the mind there for a bit, then you release that tissue until it's back where it should live instead of up here, and then you do your body scan. See what I mean? So there's lots of little odds and ends I don't teach, because if you just do enough body scanning, that sort of thing will sort of begin happening on its own. But you can make it happen a lot faster if you have these extra techniques. But then I'm adding on a lot of extra stuff to the a relatively streamlined system. But for those of you who are also doing the Lohan material, having those kinds of Neigong, those kinds of internal skills, is very, very helpful for your health, for your practice. And if you want to do internal martial arts stuff, you have to have those skills, period, flat out. Otherwise, you can't do it. Okay, let's see. In my experience, I haven't tried. Okay, let's see. Sugar-free Yoga Sutras of Patanjali say that when the mind is not sleeping, there are only four things that happen in the mind: memory, correct perception, incorrect perception, made-up stuff. Hmm. Okay, no problem. I would add on a few more things, but like reason, logical reason is another one. Uh, right, my friends. Well, since there are no questions flying in, oh, there's one. I don't really have a name for that project, but two people told me that the the hypothetical project I mentioned the other day, I have like 10 of these projects banging around in my head, but I have no money, so I can't do any of them. But the project that I mentioned a couple of days ago on the stream, where I was talking about if you had $5 million and you put it into a high dividend ETF, or you put it into a double leveraged S&P, that 5 million would kick out, after reinvesting at a rate of inflation, would kick out maybe 50 grand USD a year, or the equivalent moving forward adjusted for inflation. And that's probably enough. That's probably enough, since the requirements of a person in retreat are quite minimal. It's like some food, some water, a bit of medical care, a bit of clothing now and again. Like, it's a very minimal amount of stuff that they need to maintain that retreat. So we could probably, with a relatively small amount of money, comparatively speaking, with how much money there is in the world, um, set up a fund that would be able to fund huge numbers of yogis in India, coming out of all of the major Tibetan monasteries, and maybe also the tantric monasteries in Japan, like the one at Mount Hiei, et cetera, so that people who wanted to do retreat for a year or 3 years or 10 years would have the financial backing to be able to just apply through their monastery after completing their tantric training at the monastery and say, I don't just want to know this stuff. I want to go do it, and I want to do it until I've accomplished it. No problem. Here's this person. They're going to be taking care of you. The money's already there. Go do it. We'll see you in 10 years. You understand? So that we're taking barriers away from great practitioners with great aspiration to do great practice so that they can just go do practice. And through this, therefore, hopefully, in the long run, we would have the world's great traditions would have great practitioners in them who can teach the next generation what all this stuff is really about. So that's the idea. This is one of 10 or so ideas that I have banging around in my head. That if you are intelligent about money and you know how to create financial things, it might be possible to create certain types of charitable trusts with funds that are invested in a certain way, et cetera, that if we could get the money together for it, um, all of a sudden it becomes this thing, this entity that when managed right could last a few hundred years and kick out enough money to ensure that every generation, for at least a few generations, potentially for a couple thousand years if the world doesn't implode, right? As long as you're reinvesting at the rate of inflation, some years the economy will tank and the whole thing will, you just have to wait because it can't kick out any money. But every year where the world is growing at the rate it has been for the last 150 years, it kicks out a certain amount of money and you can support all this stuff and all these people in retreat. See what I mean? So, there are ways that with a certain amount of money invested a certain way and managed a certain way, you could create a sustainable entity that would support people that want to do serious practice in at scale. At scale. So that's the idea. With the 5 million forever, it's sort of like with 5 million bucks, you could create great beings whose benefits would last forever. Okay. If I don't want to be murdered in my sleep and only last a very short period of time, then I must depart and spend some time with the wifey. So thank you all for being here, and we shall pick it up very soon. Yeah? Okay. Oh, also, for all of you who are here, I'm going to be a little bit late tomorrow. That will be reflected in the live stream itself. I may not do class until 9:30 tomorrow instead of 8:30. But I'll make sure that I put something up so that you see that on the invite. Okay. All right. I'll see you tomorrow. It'll be a bit late, but 9:30 to 10:30 my time tomorrow, an hour later than normal. Everyone pray for Hans that he made it to sleep. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Oh, I should do my thing. Hope to see you again soon.